Foreign Minister Penny Wong is flying to Fiji as we speak. It's an attempt to prevent China gaining a stranglehold in the Pacific. For more on this, let's bring in John Blaxland, a Professor of International Security at ANU. Thanks very much for your time. We know initially there was this Solomon deal, but then an attempt for China to go sort of region-wide. This was leaked. Obviously, at least one country had concerns about this, but how real is this threat, do you think?
So it's a real effort by China to consolidate its influence in the South Pacific. There's no question. They're offering deals that are attractive to these microstates that are looking to bolster their infrastructure, bolster opportunities, and effectively capitalise on the fact that they're the focus of so much attention at the moment. So they're going to be looking to see whatever deal they can get out of this. And the fact that the Solomon Islands has now got a deal with China, a security pact with China, points to the opportunities that these other countries in the Pacific are going to look to capitalise upon as well.
One of the things out of this that got a lot of attention was a so-called, shared approach to policing. Do we read into this, China is willing to help out these countries with pure manpower and keep the peace, and we won't ask any questions about the sort of government you're running, and that for a government of the day that might not be so squeaky clean, that's a better choice than a bit of a peskier neighbour, if you like Australia, concerned about human rights and democracy and things such as that. Is that what you read into that particular element of this sort of proposal?
So there is an element of that, yes. Essentially, a government that's fairly authoritarian bent in China is finding that there are leaders in the South Pacific who are interested in consolidating their power. They're not particularly comfortable with the approach Australia's taken about openness and transparency. And it looks on one level kind of convenient. But if we look, for instance, at just what's happening in the Solomon Islands, we need to caution our friends in Solomon Islands about the risks at stake. Essentially, China has a track record of playing a fairly heavy-handed approach when it does deploy security elements. And let's face it, Solomon Islands, the people don't speak Chinese there. The Mandarin speakers are few in number. There are Chinese citizens and Chinese descendants who speak various dialects inside Solomon Islands, of course, but that's not the real concern. The real concern is what happens when society is torn apart by political division over the direction of state. And where this, I think Manasseh Sogavare may well be looking to have a honeymoon period that could actually lead to significant knock-on negative consequences down the track. We saw the protests in November last year. These were about Chinese influence. Those protests may well return. There are concerns there that may well have repercussions across the Pacific as well, particularly as these countries look to probably squeeze out Australia a little bit in making room for China.
So how would you describe some of the rest of the countries and their attitude to this prospect? We know that China's found someone relatively sympathetic in Sogavare, but is it a bit harder in the rest of the region?
So Kiribati has recently done away with its relations with Taiwan, signed up to relations with China. It's already indicated it's prepared to do deals with China over airfields and port facilities. So there is an interest there amongst a number of these countries. I think we need to be fairly level-headed about this and not get too worked up about it. We're in this for the long game. This is a flying visit by Foreign Minister Wang Yi. And we need to remember that we have enormous goodwill. My sense is also that what we're seeing here is an opportunity for China to try and consolidate its grip in the South Pacific, capitalising on the tail end of that concern about Australia not being attuned to Pacific sensibilities about climate and environmental issues, also capitalising on the fact that the new government is only just getting its feet under the table. But Penny Wong is actively looking to counter that and engage constructively in Fiji and elsewhere. So, as I say, yes, it is a significant event, this visit. I think we need to be putting to our neighbours in the Pacific that we're not just a fair weather friend, we're here for the long run. And also we have a lot more in common with them. We have common law, we're English speakers. The elites send their kids to school in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne. Let's not lose perspective on how much we have in common, and respectfully engage them on the issues of felt needs that are going to touch their interests as well.
So that's the advice for Labor. We'll see how this mission goes. The other fascinating thing is the relationship between Australia and China. On the one hand, you talk about us pushing back on this element and the Quad, which has upset China, and you think it's the same old, but we actually had ministerial contact after the election. Do you see any genuine prospect for thawing, albeit Australia's, not going to do it on China's terms?
Yeah, so this really does depend on the approach that China wants to take, because this is a new government. The old government in China hasn't changed. The sanctions that were imposed on the coalition government are ones that they are in a position to review and to turn off. And that would be the sign of goodwill that probably would provide an opening. The letter from Li Keqiang is all well and good. That isn't enough for the Labor Party to make a significant concession in terms of attitudes and approaches towards China. There has to be something more substantial. But look, in this game, words matter, diplomacy is significant, and the rhetorical shift, even though substantively the Albanese government is not saying it's going to do anything terribly different to the coalition government that predated it, essentially the way it portrays these issues and the fact that it isn't the coalition government does provide an opportunity for the Chinese to demonstrate that they do want a serious reset. And of course, the Albanese government is in a position where it has to be very careful about how it words what it says, without overcommitting before China actually delivers something substantive.
John Blaxland, always good to talk. Thank you. I'm sure there'll be more on this topic as we go forward.